These three Minnesota Vikings do not get enough love. I've selected three players for the Minnesota Vikings team that nobody talks about. Nobody talks about these players, even though they're huge players for the Vikings, and they got us a lot of wins. They've done a lot in this 2019 season and beyond. To make this list, they have to be starters, though. I can talk about three players that are all backups that nobody's talking about that don't get enough love because, of course, they're backups. Backups a lot of the time are underrated and nobody knows about them because they're backups. These three players are all starters that are very underrated by the Vikings, starting with Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph is a player a lot of people know. Whether you're a Vikings fan or not, Kyle Rudolph has played, I think, I think he's going into his 10th year with the Minnesota Vikings, I'm pretty sure. And Kyle Rudolph has just been great all 10 years. He's played with, I think 9 different quarterbacks now. 8 or 9, 7, 8 or 9, somewhere around there, different quarterbacks Kyle Rudolph has played with as starters throughout his entire career, and he's looked great with all of them. His best was probably with Sam Bradford. He looked the best with Sam Bradford. That was the year he went to the Pro Bowl and the year he was used the most. But Kyle Rudolph is one of the best players in the red zone. I know there's better tight ends than Kyle Rudolph. I mean, Zach Ertz might be better. Travis Kelce, Gronkowski's back. You got, what's the guy's name? George Kittle. You got so many wide receivers. I mean, tight ends that are better than Kyle Rudolph. But if I was a quarterback and I was in the red zone, we had 5 yards to go, 4th and 5 to win the game, and I was throwing to one player in the entire NFL. By the way, this is not just the Vikings. This is the entire NFL. And I was throwing to one player in the red zone. I would throw to Kyle Rudolph. And I'm completely unbiased. I think Kyle Rudolph is probably the best player to throw to in the red zone if you're going like 5 yards in the entire NFL. I know he's not the best. I know he's not the best tight end. I know George Kittle's better after the catch. Kyle Rudolph is not that great after the catch. Travis Kelce is a better route runner. Zach Ertz is Zach Ertz. I mean, he gets so many targets. But Kyle Rudolph is amazing in the red zone. He catches everything. He has the biggest catch radius. His catch radius is massive. This guy catches everything. I would throw to Kyle Rudolph. I don't care who's better than Kyle Rudolph. I don't care all these players that might be better than Kyle Rudolph. If I was throwing to one player in the entire NFL and I was in the red zone, it would be Kyle Rudolph. And it's almost like no one's talking about him. Now, I know there's better tight ends in the league. I've said this many times. I know there's better tight ends in the league. But I'm saying Kyle Rudolph does not get enough love. He is a great tight end. And I think his number may be retired eventually because he's played so much with the Vikings and has been dominant all of his years. Yet nobody's talking about it just because he doesn't get as many targets as Travis Kelce or doesn't make as many big plays as George Kittle because he's great after the catch and might not be as great of a blocker as Vance McDonald. But he's damn good tight end, and that's why I have him as one of my most underrated Vikings. Even though a lot of people know who he is, he deserves way more love than he gets. And that's why I think he is one of the most underrated Vikings with the number 2 position. I selected 3 players, so I'm going 3, 2, 1 in this list. And for number 2, I have Dan Bailey. Now, Dan Bailey is another player just about everyone knows. If you're a fan of the NFL, you probably know who Dan Bailey is. He's a veteran kicker who's been in the league for a long time, played with the Dallas Cowboys, the biggest franchise in all of football. Dan Bailey is a player who was amazing last year. Dan Bailey, I think he's made all of the kicks 50 yards or more last year, which is incredible coming from a player who's been playing that long. He's so old. Dan Bailey deserves his new contract and deserves all the money he's getting, yet he gets no love from it. I mean, I know there's better kickers in the league. I know the Saints got a better kicker, Texans, the Ravens got better kickers. I'm not even saying all their names because I don't know how to pronounce some of them. But okay, Dan Bailey, I would rank him as one of the best kickers in the game. I know he had a bad season 2 seasons ago. It did not look that great, but last season, he deserved more love. He deserved to go to the Pro Bowl, although I wouldn't have put him over the Pro Bowl as Will Lutz, kicker of the New Orleans Saints, but Dan Bailey still deserves more love. And I know he's a kicker, and they usually don't get the same, but if you look at how Dan Bailey played last year, it was amazing. I think he got 3 special teams of the week. Great player. I'm a huge fan of Dan Bailey, and he deserves more love. With number 1, this is a player I've been talking about all the time, and that is CJ Ham. CJ Ham was our undrafted free agent, and I think 2017 or 2016, he was our undrafted free agent. I think he was a walk-on. Yeah, he was a walk-on free agent. And CJ Ham came on, has made these running backs look amazing. He played with Dalvin Cook. Everyone looks at Dalvin Cook as being one of the best running backs in the game. I think he is one of the best. I think he's a little bit overrated Dalvin Cook is. But CJ Ham is the reason why. I mean, you put Dalvin Cook on a team without CJ Ham, he's not going to be looking the same. A team that has an equal amount of, an equally good offensive line, is that the right way to say it, as the Minnesota Vikings, and you take CJ Ham completely out of the picture, Dalvin Cook is not going to be looking that great. He's going to be looking great in the pass game, but I don't think he's going to be looking that great in the run game. So that's why I would say CJ Ham is the most, I wouldn't say underrated, but I'd say the player on the Vikings that deserves the most love, more love than all of these other players. So that's my list for the 3 players that don't get enough love for the Minnesota Vikings. This list needs to be starters because I can talk about backups all the time. Mike Boone, I could talk about Mike Boone. Obviously, he doesn't get enough love. He's the 3rd string running back for the Minnesota Vikings. But CJ Ham, Dan Bailey, and Kyle Rudolph all deserve more love than they get.